Monster Hunter's art style is complicated, but very distinct, and I've seen many videos praising its designs and how to mimic it. PCAT talks about the feel of the monsters. Both Subjectively and Unnatural History Channel talk about how the science impacts design, with Subjectively even giving a great demonstration, but I've noticed none actually talk about the art style of monsters as a whole. What makes each monster look like they belong in a Monster Hunter game? Though this video by Character Camp comes scarily close, releasing literally as I was writing this script. Anyway, let's start with what many already explained. Science in design. Giving monsters a fantastic trait, but giving realistic reasoning in some way, shape, or form. Paralyzing venom, serrated claws, exploding slime, greatsword tail, a jetpack! Well, to a certain extent. Sometimes they even have real scientists make sense of it after designing, instead of the other way around. So now they have the science, but we still need to make these design aspects stand out, which is where exaggeration comes in. Exaggerating those given parts not only give them unique silhouettes, they also draw our focus, either when viewing them as an image or when hunting them in-game, directing us on what, where, and when to target, even though 90% of the roster has their head as a weak point anyway. Odogaron is basically 20% claw. More than half of Glavenus is tail. Paolumu is a giant floating cheek pouch, but you get the gist. Most have 1 to 3 unique body parts that are exaggerated to emphasize a strength and/or weakness, which is another great detail in some designs, restraint, knowing when and where to add details. Most monsters have a palette of at least 3 colors, and use the 60-30-10 color rule, 1 dominant color, a secondary color, and the accent color or highlights. Barioth is primarily whites and browns, making his bright orange tusks even more eye-catching. Also, give it only like 1 to 2 distinct parts instead of an entire arsenal of weapons. But if you do, at least make it coherent. Many flying wyverns like Astalos, the Wraths, Raidao are covered in head to tail with weaponry, but their final design implements all this weaponry much better, much more cohesive compared to something like Magnamalo. Heck, even Congalala can pull it off. These last few are all basic design tips, beginner's notes applicable to most designs really, even ones outside of Monster Hunter, because it doesn't matter how complex your art style or process is, it's the basics that make the most memorable final products, and the Monster Hunter team knows that. So now that we have the general checklist down, what really makes a design look like it belongs in Monster Hunter? Personally, it's the limitations. 2 right off the top of my head are skeletons and polygons. I'll be referring mostly to old generations, as this was when these limitations actually influenced monster design. Though many modern designs still keep the essence, the old gen designs just have a different feeling to them. Let's start with the skeletons. Oh, no. I won't be talking about these skeletons, I'll be talking about these skeletons. So in case you haven't noticed, the classifications in Monster Hunter are based on the model's skeleton, or the animation rig that a monster uses. Tigrex, or Tigrex, despite its quadrupedal locomotion, is actually a flying wyvern, because it has the same rig that actual flying wyverns like Rathalos and Kazoo use. Very obvious when looking at their shared animations. That is so cursed. The same goes for other wyverns, giving them distinct proportions unique to their class. Some monsters also have unique skeletons even within their class. Nergigante, Gogmazios, Valstrax, Shara Ishvalda, the Jivas, and the Magalas are hunched over compared to other more proudly posed Elder Dragons. Same goes for the bipedal-ish Fatalis, Zora, and Dire Miralis. There are also the reptilian/mammalian fanged wyverns, runner/flying bird wyverns, and bear/ape fanged beasts, and many more, I'm sure. But even with the existence of unique skeletons, many, especially within the same class, share the same basic one, just altering some of the bones if need be. And there's a simple reason for this asset reuse: budget. Development takes time, effort, and most importantly,
money!
Because in case you forgot, this is still a video game, a product. So the more time you spend on making everything unique, that's more money spent and time wasted until release. I've tried rigging before, and let me tell you, that shit's tiring. So it's easier to reuse existing skeletons instead of creating new ones for each monster. Most shared rigs are fairly obvious ones, like Rathalos and Legiana. So it's important to give your designs relatively the same proportions as existing monsters, though shared skeletons can look unique, like Gobel and Nibblesnarf still technically using the Leviathan skeleton despite looking more Piscean. The same goes for Uthduna and its larger build, compared to sleeker, more streamlined Leviathans like Mizutsune. But in rare occasions, you can also give a skeleton from one class to a monster in another, leading to implementations like Flying Leviathan, Thunder Element Kelby, Popodrome, and my all-time favorite, Frogjang. The skeletons also influence a model's movement, but in older games especially, it was difficult to add many little spikes without making the silhouette difficult to read or increasing the polygons, which is the next limitation. Before Capcom unlocked the ability to make my PC sound like a fucking Valstrax wing, they had to work within the limits of handheld consoles, making it so that an entire old generation monster roster has less polygons than one modern monster. Comparing Rathalos' design over the years, its PS2 face had 1,390 polygons compared to the modern 11,274. Limited by the technology at that time, the Monster Hunter team had to find different ways to show detail, having to, here's that word again, exaggerate certain parts to be readable in-game, relying on textures to give it detail without sacrificing performance. Comparing old and new gen Rathalos, the older one looks outdated, sure. But for the time, and even now actually, it conveys the exact details that make him unique. The beak, ears, horn, and jawplate all combine together to give him a unique silhouette, even if it's just his head. The teeth are also spaced out enough to make them visible against the face's clutter. All of this, along with his piercing blue eyes to contrast the red, and it's such a good design that carried over even better to his HD version. Apart from the distinct parts, why? Scales are also heavily exaggerated in most monsters, being large enough to be visible on the small screen of a PISP. This exaggeration gives Monster Hunter its distinct scale work, and also led to what I personally believe is its most defining detail, especially among older rosters: segmentation. Many old monsters have some form of visible segmentation. Rathalos, Lagiacrus, Baroth. Despite the class difference, many reptilian wyverns have segmented plating. Even among monsters with minimal or no scales, Nargacuga's fur before its HD revamp looked very segmented, which is extremely visible in its Silverwind model. But after its worldification, its fur now clumped together to look like scales. The fur on Gammoth's shoulders and back layer to look like armor plating, which works especially well in low poly. The reason Teostra's mane looks so unique is because of that same layering. Kezu, despite lacking, well, everything. It does lack everything. It doesn't even have a theme. Kezu, despite lacking, well, everything, has its skin wrinkle in a scale and plate-like pattern. And Fatalis, even without armored plating, has spikes on its neck, creating distinct breaks, giving it the illusion of segmentation. The segmentation isn't limited to the creature's back or entire body as well. These are also extremely visible in more solid body parts. Most monster legs and wyvern wings also see this segmentation. Zinogre has a row of plates on its shoulder that look like a collar on a coat, or the Breckrund of a pauldron. It also gives a visible separation line between the back and arms. But a design can only do so much with that kind of plating. You need to not only designate areas of plates and scales, both big and small, but to give transitions between sizes to give it a cohesive look. Giving it the final detail, I think, ties the entire Monster Hunter look together: their flow. No matter how chaotic a design may look, if you observe closer, details overlap on invisible lines throughout the body. Monster Hunter scales are like flowing rivers, organizing bigger plates in these lines and slowly transitioning away from them, giving that artificially natural look and feel compared to other Hunter-likes. Now within this flow, there are repeating patterns affected by the shape of the scales and plates, like waves would on a shore. Monsters like Lagiacrus, Najarala, and Alamadur have plates that flow forward before sharply turning back, enhancing their long body plans. And while monsters like Baroth and Brachydios have the same flow, their plates extend outward, overlapping their limbs, making them look more armored. Simpler designs like Safi and Fatalis have smaller organized scales that slowly transition into bigger structures, with a visible pattern and flow, especially on the arms. And even more chaotic designs like Shara Ishivalda, Akantar, and Nergigante have scale patterns like these all over their body if you look hard enough. But I suggest looking at monster models in the story series because the details are more visible there, and you can definitely feel the difference between new and old gen designs, which is great for reference. Now, barring the last few things I mentioned, here are details that aren't present in all monsters but still quite common. external tooth structures, whether it's an extra set of actual outside teeth like Deviljho, Anjanath, and Lao Shan Lung, extra plate fangs like in Lagiacrus, Glavenus, and Zinogre, or just straight up plate teeth like in Darren Moran, Monster Hunter likes to add these external teeth. Some for personality purposes, like in Anjanath's case, making the brute wyvern look more brutish, while some have a canon purpose, like Glavenus using theirs to sharpen their tail. But for the others, maybe it's so that monsters, even with their mouths closed, would look menacing without actually giving them external teeth, though I'm not entirely sure. It could be for extra grip strength, which would fit Lagiacrus, but I think it again just goes down to polygon limitations and getting a clear, distinct silhouette in low-definition screens back in the day. Another tooth-related detail are tusks. Fatalis, Doshiguma, and Rajang have these to reduce the simplicity of their designs, but that's just speculation. Now, apart from teeth, one last protrusion makes its way into designs. Spikes, especially on the chins. Almost every monster we hunt has chin spikes, while some have a purpose like Rathians using it to feed their chicks, and Yukanlos using theirs to break through ice, most just have them to enhance their look. Legiana, Rajang, Zinogre, Volcano doesn't even have one naturally, but it just has to grow an ice goatee for some reason. These spikes are also present near the knees, though they're actually part of the segmentation from earlier, unlike most wings which don't have that same reasoning. Some wyvern wings have a row of spikes, specifically located on the main wing finger, visibly present in many flying wyverns like the Wraths and Astalos, with some bird wyverns like Yankutku also receiving some. Again, some have known purposes like Barioth using theirs to hook onto ice, both Raidao and Seregios even arranging theirs to act like blades, but again, it's usually aesthetics like the small bumps in Diablos' wings. Moving on to the rest of the body, many monsters incorporate human anatomy in certain parts, usually the arms and stomach. This is easy to notice in Rathalos with clear humanoid pectoral and abdominal muscles, despite needing a keel for flight, monsters like Nergigante and Zinogre having lobed ears like humans, and lastly, many monster arms like Brachydios and Zinogre, again, possess biceps, triceps, and deltoids, despite their theropod and canid inspirations, with the scales that cover them being their next distinct feature. Scale wrapping. Yes, I know scales already do this, they don't just float over the body. What I mean is that they float to follow the shape of muscles and fat underneath, making monsters look more defined and muscular without actually making them defined and muscular. Sort of like shrink wrapping, but cooler. This is very obvious in monsters like Odogaron. Another common modification are overhead leg plates. The one thing that I had trouble with while making a Monster Hunter Godzilla. Anime monsters like Brachydios, Zinogre, and Glavenus have this trait, and they're not that intrusive, it's just very hard to make the platings flow in that direction, especially if you're doing it in 2D. But they ultimately serve no purpose most of the time. Which is weird, but not as weird as some claw shapes, another Monhun staple. Again, either with purpose, like Barioth's spiked claws and Odogaron's serrated claws, or for aesthetic, like Zinogre's lightning-shaped claws and Legiana's angled claws. But all of these details I just discussed aren't as common as the last two. From predators to prey and grounded to volant, there's no shortage of tail weaponry in Monster Hunter. Maces, swords, knives, fire, hoses. Almost every monster needs to have a tail weapon, and if not that weapon specific, it's still usually covered in something. And last but definitely not least, crown scales. This specific shape is present in so many designs that it's very hard not to notice. Of course, they're constantly changed to fit the design, but they all still keep that 3-point structure. Looking back at these, I realized that Zinogre really has all of the Monster Hunter staples plastered onto him. So to recap everything, you need to give scientific reasoning to the feature you add. Once you figure out that feature, exaggerate it in the design. Afterwards, work within the limits. Use existing skeletons. Segment the design, and add in some usual Monster Hunterisms that you can find. I'm not saying this entire process is foolproof. Definitely would depend on how you execute it, or your art style, your skill level. Not saying it's bad, but I'm just telling you it will affect the final results, so don't always expect it to be good. But it should be a great guideline to use even outside of fan-designed monsters. This, personally, the process before I started talking about the Monster Hunter details, is usually the main process I use. Use the basics, don't overcomplicate things. Think about what you want and simplify that. Don't add too much, because once you start adding one thing and then another, you won't be able to stop yourself. Alright, this is just a small side quest. I'm still writing the script for the electricity video, so don't worry, but I thought this would make a great intermission video, mainly inspired because of my recent Monster Hunterification of Godzilla, and the other kaiju, maybe. Which might be a good idea for a video too, who knows? Like the background process of it. Or like a follow-up to this one to show how it would actually work. But yeah, electricity is hard to study, and my channel is dying, so I needed to feed the machine. Anyways, that's all for now. Usual video topic will be coming someday, definitely. So, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Best of luck out there. Enjoy some bloopers on your way out. Picat. Picat. Picat? Picat. Picat talks about the fuck. Paulu. Folk. But they execute their... Heck, even Kongalala can put it up. Heck, even Kongalala can put it up. Put it off? Heck, even Kongalala can put it... My gosh! Excuse me. Shorter torsos and tails along... Shorter torsos and... There are also the reptile... My god. But in older games specific... Oh, man. Being large enough to be visible on the small screen of a PISP. Do I say that? Do I say PISP or PSP? So many people are gonna be mad. Can you imagine? Will this increase engagement? I hope so. But after its worldification, the world has spikes on its neck. My god. And even more chaotic designs like Shara Ishvalda. Why? Why did I say it like that? A cantor. Fatalis, Doshiguma, and Rajang, yeah.